She was everywhere one season, crying, shouting, fighting, carrying whole episodes on her back. Then one day, she was gone. No goodbye scene, no update, no explanation from the network. The silence hit harder than any breakup we ever watched on screen. This is about Jasmine Pineda disappearing from the world of 90 Day Fiancé like someone erased her with one clean swipe. Viewers notice fast. One week her clips still floated around social feeds, the next week nothing. No promo, no pillow talk mentions, no soft landing, just empty space where a loud presence used to live. What makes this unsettling is how normal the chaos felt before she vanished. We saw tears, we saw fights, we saw a relationship pushed to its limits for entertainment. That part felt familiar. Reality TV thrives on emotional mess. But what we did not see matters more. No transition episode, no closure scene, no explanation from TLC. When a cast member drives ratings and then disappears without a word, silence stops feeling neutral. Viewers were left holding two versions of the same story. The one on screen showed drama that looked messy but manageable. The one off screen left behind a gap so wide it raised questions nobody answered. This was not a minor background character fading out. This was a headline. Maker removed mid-sentence. And here is the part that sticks. Reality TV loves endings. Breakups get finales. Villains get tell-alls. Even the most chaotic exits get framed. This one did not. The lack of framing became the story. When a network says nothing, people start filling the blanks, and this is where the first crack starts to show because silence like this rarely appears by accident. The core question sits right here. How does someone go from being central to the storyline to being erased without a trace? And who benefits from no one asking why? Behind every quiet disappearance, there is usually a moment where something shifted off camera, a line crossed, a risk introduced, something the audience was never meant to see. And once you notice that, the disappearance stops feeling random. It starts feeling timed. Before the silence, Jasmine was not a side character. She was the volume knob. Every scene felt louder when she walked in. Tears came fast. Anger came faster. Love came hardest. On 90 Day Fiancé, her emotions drove entire episodes forward, especially in her relationship with Gino Palazzolo. On screen, Jasmine looked volatile. She reacted big. She spoke fast. She cried, without holding back. Some viewers called it too much. Others called it real. What matters is why the show leaned into it. Reality TV does not reward calm. It rewards reaction. Jasmine gave production exactly what keeps people watching, emotional stakes that never felt flat. That does not mean the behavior was fake. It means it was selected. Scenes get chosen. Conflicts get extended. Emotional responses get replayed. When someone delivers raw emotion consistently, producers notice. They build arcs around it. They return to it. They protect it while it performs. And here is the part people miss. Chaos on screen only works when cooperation exists off screen. Filming schedules need consent. Interviews need participation. Confessionals need trust. Jasmine showed up. Again and again. You do not get that level of access without some belief that the system around you is stable. Explosive moments look spontaneous, but production requires structure, releases, clearances, continuity. Even the mess runs on rules. This is where the first reversal begins. The version of Jasmine many viewers labeled as unpredictable had to be dependable in ways we never saw. You cannot build a season around someone who refuses to engage. She engaged fully, emotionally and logistically. Producers did not just capture her reactions, they relied on them. When she showed devotion, it anchored the relationship storyline. When she showed fear, it raised stakes. When she melted down, it delivered ratings. Her intensity became an asset, but assets come with conditions. Once a storyline depends on someone, trust becomes currency. And when trust flows in one direction, leverage forms quietly. What looked like chaos was also collaboration. And collaboration creates vulnerability. The moment trust replaces caution, the power balance shifts. And that shift is never announced out loud. The tension builds right here, because when someone believes the system protects them, they stop guarding themselves. And when that protection disappears, the fall feels sudden, even if the warning signs were already there. At this point, the story stops feeling like gossip and starts feeling like psychology. especially when you look at how foreign cast members move through a system built in a language, culture, and legal structure not their own. Contracts exist, yes, but contracts do not explain everything. Day-to-day filming runs on conversations, verbal guidance, casual reassurance, someone saying you are fine, keep going, nothing to worry about. For cast members who depend on visas, those words land heavier than paperwork. When English is not your first language and immigration rules feel intimidating, you listen to the people around you who sound confident. Producers speak with authority. They control schedules. They control access. Over time, reassurance starts to feel safer than reading fine print. That context matters once rumors enter the picture. Not headlines, not court documents, just whispers. Something about a filing, something about money. At first, it sounds like background noise. Relationship drama already lives in that space. Viewers expect financial arguments. Cast members expect tension. Nobody panics over a rumor, but this is where the tone shifts. Because rumors become dangerous when the person involved never hears them directly, according to multiple accounts. The alleged lawsuit involving Gino Palazzolo did not land as a formal notice in Jasmine's hands. It traveled through side channels, third parties, quiet confirmations. The shock was not the amount being discussed. Money disputes happen. The shock was discovering something active existed without her knowledge while cameras kept rolling. Secrecy changes everything. Filing quietly while filming reconciliation scenes creates two timelines. One public, one private. When those timelines collide, trust collapses fast. Especially when others seem to know before you do, and once you realize information moved around you instead of through you. Every reassurance you receive starts to feel fragile. People close to Jasmine Pineda describe disbelief first, not anger, confusion. Filming had not slowed. Nobody flagged a risk. Nobody paused production. Scenes about the future continued. That disconnect matters. It suggests incentives stayed intact even as personal risk increased. This is the moment where drama becomes exposure. Because a civil dispute tied to finances does not live in isolation when immigration status exists in the background. Paperwork crosses paths. Systems notice patterns. Things escalate without warning. The most destabilizing part was not learning about a lawsuit. It was learning that others knew earlier. That knowledge changes how every previous interaction gets reinterpreted. Conversations replay differently. Smiles feel conditional. Silence feels strategic. And the moment Jasmine allegedly learned from someone else, not from the people filming her life, was the moment the story stopped being about relationship conflict and started becoming something else entirely. Filming did not just slow down. According to multiple reports, it stopped completely. A routine interview day turned into a sudden pause. Cameras shut off. Crew left in confusion. Producers reportedly huddled in closed rooms. Lawyers were called in. And in that silence, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Jasmine's reaction, as described by those present, was intense but human. Screaming, crying, demanding answers. Not for drama, but for clarity. She was trying to make sense of information she never received directly. For anyone who has ever felt blindsided, that level of emotional collapse resonates. Production couldn't continue because the person at the center was no longer able to participate. And here is the catch: this is where the story shifts from television to real-life stakes. Behavior off camera became as consequential as anything the cameras had ever captured. Reports suggest security was called, not because of violence, but to manage the chaos and maintain safety while legal steps were initiated. No one was making this up. The halt was structural. It required immediate intervention. The network had to figure out what happened, who knew what, and how to proceed without escalating risk further. This raises the first uncomfortable question. Who knew about the alleged lawsuit before Jasmine found out? Accounts indicate that some internal staff may have been aware weeks in advance. Production notes, emails, or informal discussions could have contained hints. But how much of that reached the person whose life was directly affected? The chain of knowledge, the responsibility, and the decisions made in that vacuum remain unclear. And that uncertainty weighs heavily, because when silence is deliberate, consequences rarely stay contained. During this period, filming scenes that portrayed reconciliation or long-term planning became impossible. The storylines halted. A cast member who had been central to the show's drama suddenly became the center of real-life tension the cameras couldn't touch. Allegedly, the network began damage control internally, shifting schedules, revising contracts, and instituting strict communication protocols. And just as viewers think the drama is contained behind studio walls, the consequences start to spill outside the show. This was no longer about ratings or edited conflict. Now legal, emotional, and procedural elements converged. The pause in filming marked a turning point. Every moment Jasmine was off camera, the stakes grew higher. What had been a television story was turning into something that could affect her life beyond the set, and in that quiet, tense space, everyone involved had to confront the same unsettling truth: this was bigger than an episode, bigger than a season, and nothing would go back to how it was before. The chaos off camera did not end with the halted filming. According to sources close to the situation, what came next was a collision between legal stress and immigration reality. A civil dispute, even one framed around money, can have consequences that ripple far beyond courtrooms. In Jasmine's case, reports indicate that her visa and immigration status suddenly became a factor. Legal filings can trigger questions from authorities. And when documentation intersects with immigration, even minor disputes become significant. It's important to note that no criminal charges were publicly announced. This was not an arrest in the sense most people imagine. Sources describe the alleged detention as part of standard procedures during processing, a checkpoint in the system, rather than punishment. Yet for someone already under stress, the experience felt isolating and frightening. Imagine navigating that process while also trying to understand what's happening with your personal life, your career, and your reputation, all while being in a foreign country. And here is where the emotional weight really hits. Friends and insiders say that Jasmine felt abandoned, not in a melodramatic sense, but emotionally. Support systems she assumed were in place, her partner, the network, the people she trusted on set, suddenly felt distant. Messages went unanswered. Meetings were delayed. Guidance she relied on disappeared. In a system where reassurance had previously carried more weight than contracts, the sudden absence of support created a vacuum. Anxiety multiplied. Trust cracked. That vacuum widened when deportation came into play. Being sent back to Panama was not a temporary pause. It was irreversible. According to multiple sources, the moment she boarded the plane marked the turning point. For viewers, it might have looked like a news brief, a quiet disappearance from the screen. But for Jasmine, this was a life-altering event. The systems she had relied on to navigate her career, her visa, and her personal safety had failed, leaving her to piece together the aftermath on her own. The combination of legal uncertainty, immigration procedures, and emotional isolation created a pressure cooker situation. Each element alone is challenging. Together, they compound. And while cameras never captured this reality, the impact was immediate and enduring. And in that space, where rules collide with human vulnerability, the story shifted from entertainment to lived experience. From ratings drama to the stark consequences of being left unprotected in a system not designed for fairness, this is where the narrative changes. The disappearance becomes permanent, and the stakes extend far beyond what any episode could show. After the deportation, the story did not stop. Sources say the network quietly began reshaping what the audience would remember. Scenes were recut, context removed, emphasis shifted. Moments that once highlighted Jasmine's reasoning or her emotional depth were shortened. Her reactions were reframed as instability. Meanwhile, Gino Palazzolo's portrayal softened. Arguments were edited down, explanations minimized. On screen, continuity remained, but the emotional balance shifted. Memory itself was being shaped by selective editing. Editing is power. It decides who appears credible and who appears volatile, who is remembered fondly, and who becomes expendable. Producers reportedly weigh every shot against narrative needs and long-term incentives. In this case, Gino remained valuable. He was under contract. He could continue generating storylines. Jasmine, removed from filming, became a risk. Without her participation, her image could be reshaped freely. That's the harsh arithmetic of reality TV. Usefulness dictates protection. Absence invites erasure. And here is where the tension deepens. Because the system creates fear without threatening directly, former crew members say there is a culture of quiet compliance. Speak up, and you may not be called back. questions storylines, and you risk being sidelined. Editors, assistants, and even producers are reportedly cautious, operating in silos that limit accountability. When everyone fears repercussions, silence becomes standard. No one person feels responsible. The system maintains itself by incentivizing obedience and discouraging disclosure. In the midst of this, Jasmine was far away, back in Panama, physically removed from the cameras, but no longer entirely without power. Reports indicate she began organizing everything she had collected: messages, emails, notes, recordings. The quiet space allowed her to see patterns, review promises that were never formalized, and connect dots that had been invisible during production. Agency shifted back to her. While the network could control how viewers saw her, she regained control over how she understood the story. Perspective does not require a set. Knowledge does not require cameras. And insight, once recovered, becomes preparation for the next move, and in that moment, something changed. What had been a series of reactions, tears, confusion, fear began turning into strategy. Jasmine was no longer just reacting to a system. She was documenting it, analyzing it, and reclaiming her narrative from a distance. The stage was set for the next chapter, one where the power dynamic was no longer entirely stacked against her. The question now was how far she would take it. Jasmine's story is not just about one cast member. Sources indicate it has sent ripples through the reality TV world. Networks reportedly watch these situations closely. The combination of legal risk, immigration stakes, and audience interest creates pressure. Silence has been a standard strategy. Do not confirm, do not deny, minimize exposure. As long as the story stays quiet, reputations are protected, contracts remain intact, and the show moves forward. But silence is only effective until it isn't. When documentation surfaces, when insiders speak, when patterns emerge, the quiet strategy can backfire. Production teams suddenly face questions they never intended to answer. Legal departments review communications, contracts, and internal notes. Everyone reassesses incentives. For executives, the story becomes a lesson in risk management. For cast and crew, it becomes a cautionary tale. Participating comes with exposure, and speaking up comes with consequences. Fair counterpoints exist. Networks are not law firms. They provide production guidance, contracts, and insurance, but they cannot guarantee legal protection, immigration outcomes, or personal safety. Producers are not responsible for every risk inherent to a civil dispute or visa status. They are incentivized to create engaging content and maintain schedules. In that sense, the system operates as designed, yet there is a reframe worth noting. When shows profit from immigration-based storylines, the stakes extend beyond contracts. Emotional labor, legal vulnerability, and trust intersect with revenue in ways that carry moral weight. Viewers see drama, but cast members' live consequences. The stories of foreign participants are monetized, often, while their real-life risk is minimized behind the scenes. That creates a tension between legality and ethics, between what can be done and what should be considered. From Panama, Jasmine's perspective changes the narrative again. Accountability becomes a possibility even if outcomes remain uncertain. She documents, shares selectively, and draws attention to patterns others might overlook. The potential exists for lessons to be learned, policies to shift, and industry practices to adjust, without promising a resolution or a public vindication. And that is why this story will not disappear quietly. It may not end in court, but it will continue to influence decisions, caution participants, and challenge the system in ways the cameras cannot capture. The ripple effects have begun, and they are far from contained. By the time Jasmine returned to Panama, the story had already been written without her. The network's silence, the halted filming, the edits, all suggested her chapter would quietly fade from public memory. But what happens when a story refuses to disappear? According to sources, Jasmine's focus shifted from anger or revenge to something deeper: acknowledgment. She wanted her side known, her experience understood, and the systems that failed her questioned. That clarity, that pursuit of truth, became her anchor, and that is why this story lingers in viewers' minds. We watch dramatic breakups and fiery arguments on screen, but behind the scenes, something more complex unfolded. Legal maneuvers, immigration pressures, and silent decision-making shape the real consequences. It unsettles us because it forces a question. How much of what we see is entertainment, and how much is someone's real life unraveling while cameras capture only fragments? That tension between spectacle and reality creates unease. It keeps the story alive even without new episodes. The final reversal is simple yet striking. What was intended to vanish quietly has done the opposite. The narrative cannot be contained. Documentation exists, witnesses exist, and Jasmine herself exists, actively piecing together what happened. The power that once seemed absolute, the network's editing, the legal veil, the silence cannot erase the fact that someone is paying attention and someone is prepared to speak. And in that space, viewers are left reflecting. This is why the drama resonates beyond TV ratings. It is a story about trust, risk, and the consequences of systems that prioritize narrative over safety. It is about a person who refused to be silenced, and it is about the fragility of perceived control. The tension we feel is the tension she lived. The stakes we imagine are the stakes she faced, but the story does not end here. In the next chapter, leaked communications, internal production decisions, and alleged manipulations by producers reveal another layer of what happened behind the cameras. And when we examine those, everything we thought we knew about the show and about Jasmine's experience could shift again. The ripple continues. And the next revelations promise to deepen the drama, challenge assumptions, and bring the unseen into view.